Hey, good afternoon. It is 3 o'clock on the dot here in the East Coast. We're going to give it a couple of more seconds for everybody to finish chewing on their sandwich and or finishing the last Zoom call. So thank you so much for joining. We'll be back in a couple seconds. All right, we're going to get started because I got a father that says if you're on time, you're late, and I want to be respectful. So thank you so much. Good afternoon. I think it's afternoon for everybody. So thank you so much for everybody for joining episode number 2 of PinPoint Plans. This episode is dedicated to something that every speaker on this call today is 100% passionate about. In order to solve the mystery of healthcare, you must be self-funded. So we are going to take a deep dive into the world of self-funding. So who will you hear from today? This voice that you hear right now, the least important person on this call. My name is Lester Morales. I am the founder of Next Impact and a self-proclaimed benefits nerd. I'll be moderating and emceeing this. And part of the PinPoint team, but the special speakers we have are 3 industry experts in the self-funding space. We've got Seth Denson, Chris Hillier, and Trent Harper. They will be making their own introductions here when they speak. But some housekeeping for as we get started. 1, this is being recorded. So if you do not want to participate, please kindly disengage. Number 2, you will be receiving a replay email of this. In that replay email, you will be able to download all of the slides that you'll see here today and interact with any questions that you may have. And 3, we do not want to make this a one-sided event. So please, although you guys are all on mute, you'll see that at the top or the bottom, depending on where you have your Zoom controls, you will see a Q&A icon. Please, at any time during this presentation, if you have a question, please click on the Q&A icon. We will try to answer and have a dedicated spot for Q&A. If we do not get to the Q&A, we will 100% make sure we reach out to you. So again, please use that Q&A feature. So for those of you that saw the invitation and joined and wondered, hey, what is PinPoint? PinPoint is a proprietary health benefits solution that is built with 3 key components. One that we're going to dedicate today, and you notice that episode 2 is kind of the name of today. This is one of 6 episodes of a webinar series that we will be hosting in regards to PinPoint. But what you should be prepared to listen to today, and if you hear nothing else today, here are some of the things that we want to prep you for. Number 1, you do have a choice. Although our industry has led us to believe that, health benefits is not a budgetable item. You have no idea what the carriers are going to give as a renewal. You have no idea what's going on. We're here to show you and tell you that that's absolutely wrong. And today, if you are fully insured and you think, oh, I'm in a safe spot, the reality of it is all of the same components of being fully insured and self-insured are exactly the same. Number 2 is the time is now. I'm sure everybody's sick of the quote, we are in a new norm, but the reality of this today is that you as an organization, whether you sit in an HR seat or if you sit in a CFO, CEO, corner office seat, the time is now, because the reality of this is these plans are absolutely saving a significant amount of dollars, and those dollars, to the third point here, is when blended with really good strategies, and you're going to hear some of the best speakers in the business talking about this, can free up cash flow for your business. And typically before COVID, we would talk about the things you could do with freeing up cash flow. But the reality of it is right now we're in survival mode. A lot of organizations are in survival mode, and we have clients that are coming to us saying, hey, because of this new health plan, we've been able to save jobs. So the reality of this is we are in a new norm, and thinking about things differently, especially with healthcare, which is your number 2 or 3 expense right behind benefits, is a crucial conversation. And 4, which I love because I started in the stop loss business when I was 22 years old outside of college. And every time I hear an employer or an advisor say it's scary, the reality of it is self-funding is exactly what you're doing today if explained right. And so we're going to jump right into our first speaker. And our first speaker, if you didn't think his picture was handsome enough, you probably have seen him on Fox News or on his TED Talk, or he is the author of The Cure, a blueprint to solve America's health crisis. AccuSure Partners' very own Seth Denson. Seth, you are batting up in the first spot. Bring us home.
Lester, thanks for the introduction, buddy. And it is certainly great to be with everybody this afternoon. And I appreciate it, Lester's setup there, because he's absolutely right. And I will tell you, as a kindred soul, because I also consider myself a benefits geek and have been in the industry now for 20 years. And have really worked in almost every aspect of healthcare, from the delivery side to the insurance side to the financing and marketing side to the analytics side. And I can tell you unequivocally that if self-funding scares you, it's because you don't yet understand that everybody, as Lester mentioned earlier, is self-funded. And if you don't believe me, I would encourage you to go take a look at the largest publicly traded health insurance companies in America and see what their stock price has done over the last decade. Because over the last decade, the average stock price of the publicly traded health insurance companies in America has risen over 500%. Just last quarter, United Health Group, the parent company of United Healthcare, posted a $6.6 billion quarterly profit, along with a stock price that has resoundingly risen over 1,000% since the passage of the Affordable Care Act. Now, why am I saying that? I'm saying that to correlate the comment that everybody is self-funded to the idea that insurance companies, I assure you, are not interested in losing money on you. And if you cost them more money than they collect in premium, they will get it back. They are highly capitalized. And sadly, and I can say this as someone who has historically worked in underwriting, while most people are playing a game of checkers when it comes to healthcare, thinking 1 year at a time, the health insurance industry is playing a game of chess. And they have figured out a 5-year transactional profit margin. Now, let's start to break down in the few moments that we have together why self-funded can be scary and why I think that it shouldn't be, and more importantly, how you can set yourself up for success going forward. Well, first and foremost, it's understanding that nobody is truly self-funded. Self-funded is actually a term utilized by the government to determine your ERISA filing status. Are you filed as a self-funded plan or a fully insured plan, fully insured being managed by the states, self-funded being managed under federal ERISA, DOL law, and it effectively means how your plan is structured. But nobody is truly self-funded. And I think that oftentimes we think about self-funding as this big behemoth of, if everybody in my company gets COVID-19, how will that impact me financially? And I'm here to tell you, it will have zero greater impact on you financially than if you were fully insured and everybody in your company got COVID-19. And that's because self-funded is not meaning that there's unlimited risk. And you'll hear from Chris here in a moment, who is arguably one of the nation's most brilliant stop-loss minds, talk about the ability to protect yourself from risk through reinsurance, which is part of every self-funded plan. But I oftentimes will refer to fully insured versus self-funded as heads they win and tails you lose. That is in the fully insured world. And what I mean by that is the fully insured insurance companies, all the ones that I've mentioned before, when you're fully insured, they get to set your rate with really no protection at renewal time for you, that if you cost them money, they can raise your rate. If you don't cost them money, they'll probably still raise your rate, but they get to keep all of the money that they didn't spend. I oftentimes will refer to fully insured as the largest legal Ponzi structure in the United States, because it allows companies the ability to utilize your money in good years to boost their profit, and in your bad years, set you up for a structure where you're gonna have to pay them back. And so I want to break all of the myths out there as to how employers can save money when it comes to the health insurance spend. First, you need to recognize that health insurance and health care are two different things. The industry wants to make you think that they are synonymous. They aren't. Health care is what you get. Health insurance is how you finance it. And so no matter what you've heard before, the only way to ensure long-term reduction in costs when it comes to health insurance and health care is to do one of two things. You reduce the number of claims that your people generate, or the price of those claims. That's it. Bigger spreadsheets with prettier colors listing more insurance companies are not the long-term solution to reducing cost. Neither, by the way, is raising deductibles. Statistics show that on average in America, 90% of all claims costs in any given company are typically generated by less than 10% of their population. In other words, you're overspending on 90% of your population because 6% to 10% of your folks are actually who are costing you the money. So the reality is, though, as I mentioned about the stock price of insurance companies and how insurance has morphed into a finance company, not a risk transference company, the way they operate is keeping you in the dark and not realizing that statistic and selling you the lie that raising your deductible is going to save you money. It's not. It's just going to make 90% of your employee population mad because they're never going to hit their deductible anyway, not statistically. And so the truth is, if you want to reduce your cost, you reduce the number of claims you consume or the price of those claims, the number of items you put into your shopping cart or the price of those items. Now, healthcare, being a sixth of our U.S. economy, operates in significant ambiguity. Nobody knows the true cost of goods, of services they are buying, and how to navigate the healthcare system more effectively. At least they don't without data. And what is that data? Well, that data is what we oftentimes refer to as the healthcare supply chain. So we talk to CEOs, CFOs, and HR managers across the country all day, every day. And regardless of the message that they deliver back, it oftentimes will culminate in one of two answers when asking, ultimately, what do you want to accomplish? And strip away all of the minutia, and we come to the conclusion that for companies, they want to provide better benefits at lower cost. Now, I've been in the industry for 20 years, and I will tell you that for the first 10 to 15 years of my career, we would call that the unicorn, the ungettable get. Well, that's just not the way healthcare works, right? You can't have better benefits at lower cost. It's one or the other. But I'm here to tell you today that you can. And we have been doing this now for a very long time, and is what we are building into what we are doing with PinPoint plans, is a turnkey solution that can provide better benefits and at lower cost. And the core of how we do it is understanding the healthcare supply chain. There are 4 components to the healthcare supply chain in America. Inpatient services, that's hospitals. Outpatient services, that's everything from labs to imaging centers to outpatient surgical facilities to physical therapy. Prescription drugs, or as I oftentimes like to refer to it, the legal drug cartel of the United States, and doctors, the people in white lab coats who we blindly trust to guide us appropriately where we need to go within the healthcare ecosystem. So I'm going to go back to something I said earlier, and you'll probably hear me say it a couple of times. If you want to reduce costs, you must reduce the number of claims or the price of those claims, not shop for dumber underwriters. They don't exist. They're all looking at the same data. To get to lower cost, you must understand the supply chain. Where in your company are people accessing care? Is it at the lowest cost and the highest quality? And by the way, healthcare is the one area of our economic system where cost does not equate to quality. Almost always across all 50 states, the lower cost providers are oftentimes, and most oftentimes, the highest quality. They're more efficient, they do it more, all of that. And so as we think about healthcare and these 4 components of the supply chain, if we ultimately want to get to our target of better benefits at lower cost, we have to understand how to navigate that supply chain. What is the key component to doing that? Data. You absolutely have to know where your supply chain is being utilized. And sadly, in the United States, health insurance plans in most states are not required to provide this data to you. We do. Within PinPoint plans is unfettered, unlimited, unabated access to data. In the United States, I'm going to get geeky on you for a minute, we transitioned to what's called ICD-10 coding in 2015. I promise you, I am no fun at parties. ICD-10 coding is something that Europe has been on for years. And the reason is because most of Europe has socialized medicine and they need to be able to forecast cost. So I want to get you to imagine for a moment driving your car going backwards down the highway at 60 miles an hour. What are the odds of you not hitting something? Well, I akin this to the same process that our health insurance system delivers in data. Here's what happened to you. You had a cancer claim last year. Okay, what does that mean for going forward, right? So the way that health insurance system oftentimes provides data to you, it's akin being an informed idiot because there's just nothing you can do with it. What we are doing through PinPoint plans is allowing you to access data in a way that will allow you to drive your car going forward down the highway. So as issues are coming up, you can move the vehicle and miss that which hits you. It allows us to see what is coming. And we are utilizing systems and technology that was created as a result of the Affordable Care Act in 2015, where we adopted new data analytics, and that's powerful because through that data, you can then develop a strategy. And that strategy is ever changing. You don't need to change what you are buying. You need to change how you are buying it. Healthcare is what you are buying. Insurance is how you finance it. How you buy that healthcare is what we are able to manage differently through PinPoint plans. It is a strategy that is unique to you as the employer, and it needs to be constantly evaluated and reestablished to make sure that it fits what is going on in your company today. Because once we have the data and the strategy, then we can find the right tools that are out there in the market. And what we have built through PinPoint plans is the ability to gather these tools appropriately and implement them in a turnkey solution that allows us to execute upon them at a very high level. And so different than a once-a-year shop the market and bring you the lesser of evils process, this solution allows us to do what oftentimes I refer to as bring the milk to the front of the grocery store. And let me explain that for a minute. I want you to think about the last time you went to the grocery store to buy milk. Where is it? It's in the far back corner. Why? Because there ain't no profit margin in milk. Grocers need you to go through the entire supply chain of the grocery store, grabbing all the things with high profit margin before you can get access to the essential of milk. And sadly, our U.S. healthcare system oftentimes operates in the same way. The hospital healthcare delivery system, in conjunction with the insurance system, wants access to care for your employees to be harder to gain, at least without generating massive profits. And what Acrisure has created through PinPoint plans is a way for every employer to take the milk and bring it to the front of the grocery store, where employees that need access to care are provided that access without the barrier of cost and profit margin. And when we execute on this, we are able to provide a higher level of benefits to our employees at lower cost. I hope that that makes sense. Lester, thanks for the time, buddy, and I will pass this back to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Seth. Man, I think you and I and a bottle of wine could solve the world's problems. But, you know, folks, I think the key thing that you need to take from Seth's portion there is that plan, right? You didn't hear Seth talk about a carrier, a vendor, oh, I've got the best relationship with United Healthcare. You heard Seth walk through the fundamentals of healthcare and the reality of the strategy that you execute on needs to address that fundamentals. You do it every day in your core business. It's just healthcare is something that we've always looked at differently. So Seth, thank you so much. Thanks for continuing to advocate in the media for our business, and with leadership like you, we will absolutely make change. So thank you, bud. Next, something that's near and dear to my heart, being the nerd that I am, is stop loss. And so, you know, self-funding, again, is the mechanics of how you finance your insurance here, or your health plan. And now the stop loss is how you protect it. So coming from Colorado, Mr. Chris Hillier, please walk us through stop loss and really make it so everybody understands that this ain't that scary.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity to be involved in this session today. So thank you, Lester. It's always a pleasure for me to hear Seth speak. Just very enjoyable. He always sheds great light and perspective on the issues. So thank you, Seth, for what you went through today as well. We're going to talk about stop loss for just a few minutes. And I will mention, of course, that there are nuances when it comes to stop loss coverage and stop loss contracts. Obviously, we have a short amount of time today to hit some of the highlights and talk high level about how stop loss protects a self-funded health plan. Obviously, anyone on the call, on the webinar today would be more than happy to spend time after the fact or in coming days and weeks to drill into some of the details and answer questions and talk through things with you. But I want to, exactly as Lester mentioned, I want to help you understand how stop loss coverage and the stop loss policies involved protect the plan and should make this a very non-risky and non-scary proposition. So looking at kind of the movement towards self-funding, and I've always been passionate, like the others on this session today, about providing awareness and education around self-funding. I do believe that this is the model and this is the plan structure where we can address the issues and address what many of you are looking for, and what Seth described as better benefits at a lower cost. And there are a lot of carriers, vendors, benefit advisors, and employers who have come to that same realization. And you look at this trend, this movement towards self-funding, where you can see more and more employers taking advantage of this opportunity. As of last year, over 74% of employees that were participating on employer-sponsored health plans were actually part of a self-funded program of some type or another. Now, most of those employees probably had no idea, because ultimately when this plan comes together, it's going to look and it's going to feel like any other program that they've been a part of. And unless you, as their employer, tell them that it's a self-funded plan, they're not going to necessarily know that. But the majority of employees participating on these programs throughout the country are actually part of a self-funded program of some type. Another thing that I just want to mention, and Seth alluded to a couple of these points, but the unfortunate reality is that all of you out there, you employers, are in the healthcare business, whether you know it or not, or whether you like it or not. And what I mean by that is that as healthcare becomes more and more expensive, as medical inflation continues to march upward and healthcare costs continue to rise, this is becoming a more and more significant part of your business every day. And it's something that you have to be proactive about. You have to be innovative and creative with, and you have to manage it. And so that's something that we know. It's something that we believe as we work with our clients across the country. It's something that we hear time and time again. On the P&L, I oftentimes will see healthcare or health insurance as the number 2 line item after payroll. Almost always is it within the top 5. And I don't think I've ever probably seen it outside of the top 10. So it's part of your business, and you're in this with us, and as an industry, we feel that way. Another unfortunate reality is that there's really no incentive out there for health insurance carriers to lower the cost of healthcare and their insurance premiums that they're charging. One of the things that's kind of interesting, back in 2010 when the ACA was passed, part of the ACA is a provision that refers to medical loss ratios. And if you really understand and kind of boil things down when it comes to these medical loss ratios, the reality is that for health insurance carriers to increase their profitability, as Seth described, that has been taking place for many, many years now, the cost of premiums has to go up. And the only way that the cost of those premiums will go up is if healthcare costs go up. And so I think that many of the carriers out there, by brochure, they'll talk about and advertise, managing costs and attempts to lower costs. But there's really no incentive for them to do that. In fact, the incentive is for healthcare costs to continue to increase, which again brings me back to the fact that if we're going to address this issue and if we're going to be successful solving this problem, it's going to come down to the work that we do together, and it's going to come down to all of you on this call being engaged and involved and really looking for those solutions and those strategies that work. So jumping into the stop loss discussion, There's really two types of stop loss policies. And again, we'll just kind of hit high level with our short time today. But there are specific stop loss policies and aggregate stop loss policies. For most plans, it's recommended that you would carry both. And the specific stop loss coverage is intended to protect you as an employer and your plan against any catastrophic claim that might take place over the course of the year. Those specific levels or specific deductibles can be set at a place that's appropriate based on your plan size and your group demographics and so forth. But ultimately, there are large catastrophic claims that may be incurred and over time will be incurred. And so the specific stop loss coverage allows you to take advantage of all the flexibility, all the control, all the cost effectiveness of a self-funded program. But when you do have one of those unexpected surprise claims, it protects you. And essentially you're transferring the risk for just those really large claims to a stop loss carrier or a reinsurance carrier. An example of where aggregate stop loss coverage might come into play, and it's not a realistic example, but bear with me. If your specific deductible set at $50,000, meaning we're going to self-fund on the plan the claims for each plan participant up to $50,000, the question could be asked, well, what happens if everyone on the plan, all the employees enrolled, the spouses, the dependent children, incur $49,000 of claims in that plan year? Your specific stop loss coverage, of course, would do you no good, and you would have a problem on your hands. That's where the aggregate stop loss coverage comes into play, where there's actually a stop loss threshold that is set that represents your maximum liability on all of the claims that you're self-funding up to that specific deductible. In other words, it protects the plan against a lot of individual stop loss hits where you're potentially, maybe funding $50,000 a pop, or maybe just generally high utilization. So when these two policies or two coverages come together, they work really well together, of course, because again, you've kind of protected yourself from both of those potential issues or problems that you might have, and ceded that risk over to a stop loss carrier. The next slide kind of gives an illustration as it pertains to the specific stop loss deductible. Again, this is just an example, right? Where if you had in place a $50,000 specific deductible, you can see in blue the portion of claims that you would be responsible for on this specific example. And then the carrier liability, which would be anything above that point. And obviously in this example, $110,000 claim would be significant and meaningful depending on your plan size and your company size. That would be important to have coverage for. And then again, in some instances, there's pretty serious and pretty extreme cases where you might be dealing with a claim situation much higher than that, but you've capped your liability and you've capped your risk at that specific deductible amount. And then the next slide is an illustration of where the aggregate stop loss coverage might come into play. The carriers actually set your attachment point or that stop loss threshold under the aggregate coverage, generally speaking, with a 25% corridor at 125% of the expected claims that they plan for you to have. Which means that if you run according to the carrier's expectations and the predictions that they might have at the start of the plan year, you would run about a 75 to 80% aggregate loss ratio. The beautiful thing about aggregate stop loss coverage, and again, this was alluded to earlier, but is with this policy in place, we actually know exactly what the maximum liability or the worst case scenario is on your program. In other words, we can use that number, and we do use that number as we plan and we budget and we think about how this is going to play out. Because of all of the amazing cost management strategies that are employed in PinPoint health plans, and otherwise with a good advisor and a good program that's going to be put in place, it's amazing, but we'll oftentimes see the worst case scenario or the maximum liability on these types of programs come in comparable to, or in some cases even less than the fully insured premiums. And so as we talk about that myth of self-funding being risky or scary or any of those types of things, the reality, in my opinion, is quite the opposite. We still know exactly what our exposure is. In the event that it's less than the fully insured premiums, right, we have some guaranteed savings to work with. And we have so much better insight and transparency into what's going on that it can become a much more predictable and sustainable model for years into the future as well. If anything, I think sometimes with those fully insured plans, it can be very risky because you never know what to expect or can be very surprised at renewal time at what type of increase the carrier might be looking to pass on. So as we again contrast fully insured to self-funding, this is a nice illustration that shows you how the components that make up these plans are actually very similar and really exactly the same. On a fully insured program, there's expenses that are built into that premium, loaded into that premium that represent administration costs and commissions and taxes and fees and all of those types of things. And then, of course, the reason that you purchase a policy is so that the carrier will pay claims, and that's the whole purpose of the program, is that your employees have a valuable benefit there that's going to mean something and take care of them when they have healthcare needs. A self-funded program is really built no differently. As mentioned, there will be some fixed costs. One of those fixed costs is your stop loss premiums that you pay to protect you against the exposure beyond those aggregate stop loss limits or specific stop loss limits. And then that dark portion of the self-funding bar graph here, the illustration, represents the claim payments. And ultimately, that portion of this bar graph could represent your attachment point or aggregate claim corridor, where again, we know exactly what our maximum liability is, exactly what our exposure would potentially be on a worst case basis. But the beauty of the model is that not only is it cost effective and there might be some savings up front, but as kind of the year goes along, you will see that there will be periods of time and months and perhaps the entire year where your claims run significantly lower than what your fully insured premiums would have otherwise cost you, or what you're budgeting or funding for on your self-funded program. That is all to your benefit, and those are savings to your bottom line and savings to the plan. And one of the things with these types of solutions that are put in place in PinPoint health plans is that if that max liability number truly makes sense and works financially for you, from an expected cost standpoint, you're going to see your actual plan costs come in, perhaps 20% below that number even. And those could be funds that, that you can reinvest back into your program, that you can hold aside in a reserve account and, offset increases in the future or otherwise utilize in the way that you see fit. But the point being is that it doesn't have to be risky. It doesn't have to be scary. In addition to having annual maximums, there's actually the ability to put in place caps so that you would know what your exposure is in any given month on a kind of accumulating basis over the course of the plan year. So I appreciate the opportunity and the time to have spoken with you about this topic today. We do a lot of stop loss work. I personally have been involved in owning and managing an MGU that underwrites stop loss coverage. I will tell you that from a stop loss underwriting perspective, everything that Seth talked about and everything that PinPoint Health Plans represents gets absolute credit and discounts applied, because these are solutions and strategies that work. Just as kind of a recap or in conclusion, I outlined what I believe to be the real benefits of a program like this. One being better economics and cost savings. Seth talked about the data and the transparency. Think about your business and think about how much you spend currently on your health plan. What other decision would you make in your company that represents that significant of a financial investment without good data, good understanding, and good information to base those decisions on. Smart strategic decisions, flexibility and control. And as I mentioned, I actually believe this model to be much more stable and much more sustainable than a traditional fully insured program. So it's been a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you for your time. And Lester, I'll throw things back to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. And, for those of you that are not, insurance nerds like us, I hope that was helpful to understand. And what you should have taken from that is your fully insured plan has all of the same mechanisms that Chris just indicated. They're called differently. And if you want to check me on this, go back to your last renewal, and I want you to look at the line item that's called pooling point. And I want you to look at the renewal workup and look for the pooling charge. A pooling point and a pooling charge is exactly the same thing as a spec deductible and the premium that you pay. It is nothing different. All it means is after your claims get to a certain number, you don't have to worry about it anymore. So what Seth said in regards to if you think that this is anything different, and what Chris just showed you in practical numbers gives you the ammo to go back and ask the right question. So again, if you wrote that down, spec deductible, spec premium is the same as your pooling point and pooling charge. I really encourage you to go ask those questions because it will be enlightening to see who and what is the answer. So batting in the third spot. So Chris just mentioned, hey, upfront credits and underwriting and all of that stuff. So we're going to bring it to the actual insurance company on the phone. So Trent Harper, walk us through, obviously you're going to confirm a couple of things that you've heard already, but specifically in regards to different techniques that can be taken, that someone like you who looks at data and wants not to pay a large claim and a reimbursement out, you want to make sure that every plan is doing all it can to save money on claims. Talk to us about the specifics of what it is that PinPoint is doing that gets you excited.
You got it. Well, thank you, Lester. And thank you to Seth and Chris for setting that up. It is wonderful to be here with you. Here at Breakpoint, as Lester mentioned, right, we are the underwriting, essentially what that insurance company kind of looks like in that self-funded environment. We've been doing self-funding for quite some time, both in property and casualty as well as employee benefits. And I'm here to tell you that there is no better way to take control of some of the largest costs that you have as employers than going self-funding. And here's the thing, as both Seth and Chris mentioned, right, we're talking about misaligned interests when it comes to what's happening in the fully insured marketplace. There is no reason why that carrier, that fully insured carrier, is going to seek after lower costs when it's in their best interest to have premiums continue to rise. And so what we bring to the table is we bring aligned interests, right? When we win with that spec and ag coverage, it means that you win, that you are driving down your costs, and that you will see that in unused claims funding, in lower premiums. You'll know that because you'll have the data, the transparency, and the control over your health plan. And so if we move to, I wanted to show kind of where Seth ended, right? Managing this supply chain. So what PinPoint plans represent is going right to the center of that target, that better benefits for lower cost, right? And you can do that by, one, going self-funded. There's no other way to do it. Unfortunately, the marketplace and fully insured, you're going to be dealing in the margins, right? You're going to be dealing with those co-pays changes, maybe some deductible changes. change up the co-insurance, whatever it is, and it's just not going to get there. So we're going right to where you need to reduce the amount of that claims cost and potentially reduce the number of claims that are happening. And so, again, to kind of just level set here, let's look at the 3 buckets of insurance, right? There's going to be claims, there's going to be expenses, and then there's going to be some money set aside for profits. That's how any insurance company works. They will segregate your premium into these buckets. And so if you win, and in this scenario we win as the stop loss, right? That means we are reducing the amount of claims you have, and what is left over is yours to keep, right? And that is the beauty of self-funding and what is happening within PinPoint. So let's talk about some few strategies and what we call cost containment solutions. Now, as pointed out before, cost containment and cutting costs does not mean cutting the quality of care, right? That quality of care and the cost relationship are oftentimes an inverse relationship. So I'm going to be talking about these cost containment solutions, but keep in mind that we are not sacrificing quality. So one of the biggest things that need to happen to really take control of these costs is approaching how you reimburse the provider differently, right? And so within PinPoint, we are talking about focusing on that inpatient, outpatient facility sector where those high cost claims are going to be. So that routine care, your primary care provider, your specialist, that is all going to be within a network contract, right? And that network contract is how you get through, and it's very common, obviously, these days. You always want the best network. You're looking for the best discounts, right? And so that network contract, that allows routine care to happen. And what is different with PinPoint is we are focusing on, instead of a nameless, faceless network contract to deal with the high-cost claims, we are talking about having an advocate that can work with your member, with your employee, to negotiate and find the best provider at the best price for those high-cost claims, right? And that can happen in direct purchasing, cash payments, bundle payments, and an approach for reimbursement that is not your standard network, that we cut ties with this concept of the best network for the best price. And what this means in action is we're talking about hospital bills. One just came across my desk last week. It was a $160,000 hospital bill that was negotiated up front with a great experience from the member's perspective, and we ended up paying $40,000 on that, right? That's a 75% savings. When you're talking about bundled payments, right, a lot of what's happening in healthcare doesn't have to happen in a hospital. There are surgery centers and other locations that these surgeries can happen, and a lot more efficient, a lot more effective, and a much higher quality for lower costs. So a standard hernia repair, right, normally might be $20,000, can come in a bundle payment from $3,000 to $5,000, right? So we are talking about significant changes and significant savings. And that's where this interest, all of these interests align, right? When you win, we win from a risk perspective. And that's what we really want to hit home with the solutions and the strategy around PinPoint, right? And so really, what does this mean for you what does it look like to have PinPoint in action? And so in this slide, you can see the top part is talking about the actual costs in a per employee per year basis. And I really want to draw your attention to, in the savings area, what we are talking about. We are talking about an average of 11% savings over current and 23% savings over renewal. And that's a big deal, right? With what Chris was talking about and that difference between max cost and expected, right, when you're funding at the max. Because of these strategies, right, we are able to underwrite you completely different than how the fully insured market looks at you. And that is very powerful. It means savings for you, and it could mean not only positive cash flow, but truly happier members, as you know from a year-to-year basis what's happening. You have the data, you have the transparency, and being on the self-funded chassis allows you a whole nother level of control, and you're no longer afraid of that 10 to 15 to 20% renewal coming back on your group without any explanation, without knowing why, and without any way to deal with it. The one other piece that I failed to mention within PinPoint is the prescription side, and we have an entire episode and webinar dedicated to the prescriptions coming up. I encourage you to log in and sign up for that. We didn't get to it much here in this episode, but trust me, there is a lot to learn about prescriptions and the savings that can come from, again, doing things differently and cutting ties with the standard PBMs or pharmacy benefit managers out in the marketplace. So at this point, I think we have some time for some questions and to wrap it back up. So I'm going to turn it back to Lester, and thank you all for being here and attending with us.
Thank you, Trent. Thank you very, very much to all the speakers. So right now, I'm going to recap a couple of things, but if you have any questions, and stay tuned because we are going to offer something here for everybody who's listening. But if anybody has any questions, please jot them in the Q&A section. And I've got a general question that came in earlier. I'm going to ask this across because you all have a different perspective of this. If you just said normal, fully insured to self-insured, same group, same claims, everything, what's the typical savings? That's question one. And then question two is, take it on PinPoint with some of the cost saving measures. What do you guys see there? And be mindful, we've got about 7 minutes to finish up. So Seth, what would you give if you're advising a client, the kind of the savings spread there between fully insured to self-insured and then with PinPoint?
Well, in general, I mean, again, I'll make sure I understand the question, Lester, is that, can you hear me, by the way? I'm
Yes,
having
sir.
some audio issues on my
Yep, gotcha.
You know, typically you're looking at just fully insured margin added to any plan being somewhere between 10 and 20%. And certainly that variance can be based on a number of key things, inclusive of, you know, the pharmacy contracts, medical versus RX spend, and things like that. So in general, just moving from fully insured to self-funded with, let's say, a BUCA, right, where we're still utilizing a traditional Blue Cross, Aetna, Cigna network, you know, one would sense that you're probably going to see in a normal year somewhere between 5 and maybe 10, 11%.
Perfect.
Now, when you factor in the direct contracting structure, the pre-negotiated pricing structure found in PinPoint, I would estimate that that is significantly greater based on the utilization in any given plan.
Fantastic. Chris, Trent, you guys concur with that statement?
Yes, I agree.
Absolutely.
Perfect. And Trent, being that you guys have seen most of the PinPoint quotes, what would you say the decrement up front, guaranteed, lowering of the claim, what kind of decrement are you giving with the PinPoint plans?
Yeah, you're usually seeing at least 20 to 25% upfront with this direct contracting, alternative reimbursement options, pre-negotiated savings. So at the very least, that's typically the starting point.
Right. So again, to recap that in English, folks, if you're listening to this and your normal plan would have cost you $1, moving over to self-funding is going to be somewhere between 8 and 12, as high as 15 points of savings right off the bat. And then with PinPoint, you heard it from the person that's actually having to sign his name to the insurance policy. Its cost containment feature in coordination with being self-funded starts off with upfront decrements of 20%. So folks, in regards to what you just heard today, not only is the flexibility and the ability to have the data such a key part, but the savings potential is absolutely huge.
Hey, Lester, this is Seth. I want to add something to that because I think, what Trent just mentioned, and that is a huge thing, especially as we think about kind of what our economic situation is like under COVID. I know for many organizations, sales is difficult right now. Generating new revenue is difficult. Many organizations are looking at ways to manage the bottom line and cost expenditures. But while I was actually doing some quick math on my board here. If you had a $25 million revenue company who had 100 employees spending $1.2 million a year, okay? So follow me here. You got $1.2 million in healthcare spend. Utilizing that 20% decrement, if you are a $25 million revenue, managing a 20% EBITDA, so a 20% margin, which is, depending on your industry, might be high, might be low, but at 20%, that's a $5 million profitable company. So at $1.2 million, that 20% savings, that's over $200,000 in effectively generated EBITDA. That is the equivalent of over $1 million in new sales to your organization just by doing this.
I often use that same thing saying our program will be your best salesperson by 10. So you're absolutely correct. So thank you for that. So, along those same lines, because obviously an organization doesn't know what they don't know, we did want to offer an opportunity. So we're going to launch a poll here that will allow you. So you should see a question on the poll. So right now we have the ability with very limited data to show you what a plan like this could save. It's not going to give you any obligation. You're not going to get a quote. It's not going to change your broker, any of that. But it is going to allow us to give you an understanding directionally of what something like this could save. So you've got a yes, you got a no right there flashing in front of you. If you would take the time, I could tell you I probably run 5 to 10 of these a day, and it's enlightening to see when an organization is getting your renewal, which all of you will be probably renewing here, given January 1st is the most popular renewal date, at least an understanding of my renewal comes out, I know that that answer is X, and this other thing that I heard, I could look at Y. And so if nothing else, it allows you an opportunity to get with a strategic plan, to have something, a bargaining chip, something in your pocket. So let us know if you think that would be helpful. Just to wrap up, and thank you for everybody that that answered there. Just to wrap up, this is episode number 2. We will continue to educate you along the way. And episode number 3 is all about RX strategies. If you think healthcare is confusing and shell games, RX might as well be, in Vegas there with Trent playing games and having, losing money left and right. It is unbelievable how much shell games that is played in the RX game. So we will have that. You will be on the lookout for invitations there. And then the rest of the strategies you'll see will go into October into talking about reference-based pricing, alternative reimbursements in November, and we'll end the year in December with a recap of the year. So again, to close this out, all of you, 100%, one, have control over your health plan if you choose, but you have to do something different. 2, you are self-funded 100% today, and the time is now to look underneath the hood. The economy is not going to get fixed here anytime soon, and we have no idea what the future with COVID is going to lie. So making sure we are looking under every stone is going to be part of a prudent business. And you just heard Seth's real quick calculation of $1 million or $1.2 million spend on what we could save you underneath PinPoint could be by far your best salesperson that you got in many, many years. 3, the reality of this is, guys, we need to look at this a different way. We are talking about saving jobs and saving your organization. And as everybody heard, we are passionate about it. This thing is not very hard. And so if you do have any questions, you want to get an impact analysis, you want to receive a quote, please, the person who invited you, please get back to them. Or if you have any questions, you'll see here the generic email for the program is pinpoint@breckpoint.com. On behalf of the speakers, on behalf of the AccuSure partners nationwide, and behalf of my behalf, thank you so much for joining. Please let us know if you have any questions about it. Remember, you can't change the future if you don't do something different. Stay well, be well, and we will talk to you guys very soon. Thanks so much.